Hello everybody, I'm Alicia Gadsden. Thank you for joining us here in LiveFit Kitchen. We're joined here today by Dr. Andrea Purcell, author of the cookbook Feed Your Cells. Thanks for joining us.
Love it. So happy to be here, Alicia.
We have a very exciting recipe for you today. Fall has arrived just barely, and this is a healthy apple crisp recipe. The fall apples are coming in. We love apples, and with the holidays coming, I get more and more emails about what can I serve for dessert. This is a pretty healthy option with thanks to Dr. Purcell for the recipe.
So what makes an apple crisp healthy?
Apples and no sugar.
And not a lot of butter.
Ooh,
and certainly not flour and the crumble topping. So we're going to talk about all of that. First, we're going to start with the crumble topping, and then we're going to move on to the preparation of the apples themselves.
So this is actually almond flour, which I had never used before today, and it's a little more coarse than the flour that you might be used to, but it smells good, and I believe that it's going to cook up very well. So we're going to combine the almond flour.
The amazing thing about almond flour is it's very buttery and silky on the tongue. And this is primarily because almonds do have a certain amount of fat in them, but it's the healthy unsaturated fats. Almond flour also has 5 grams of protein per serving, which you're not going to get in regular flour. It's much lower in carbohydrates with only 6 grams of carbs.
So I'm combining that with the cinnamon, the nutmeg, a little salt, and the walnuts, and this is forming the dry portion of our crisp topping. And I'm just going to stir that through for a moment. It already smells great. It's interesting what you said about almond flour having that sort of buttery feel, because you guys know me, I love butter. And I think butter in moderation is not an unhealthy choice. But I've seen how much butter goes into an apple crisp.
That's true. The crisp part of any crumble topping has a lot of butter. And in order to cut down on the fat and cut down on the calories, we're doing almond flour in its place. And I've used nut flours for a long time, and I continue to be amazed by almond flour.
So we're using some agave instead of refined sugar, and not a whole lot. So is this a phase 1, phase 2 recipe? No. Is this an unhealthy recipe with a small amount of agave in it? It's really not. I think that, you know, as part of an overall healthy lifestyle, that a little bit of organic agave has its place. Now, the really exciting ingredient for me today is this coconut oil. Normally, coconut oil is pretty much solid at room temperature most of the time. This one is a liquid at room temperature. So I only found it yesterday when I was shopping, and I haven't actually cooked with it yet, and I don't know how they refined it to make it a liquid at room temperature. So I will be looking into that a little bit further, you can be sure, but it seems to be a good choice. And it's going to be so much easier for cooking, so I am excited to have found it.
The coconut oil also adds a nice, healthy fat component to this crumble topping. So between the combination of the almond flour and the coconut oil, you're not going to be disappointed with this crumble. It's not going to be dry. And that's the role typically that butter plays in a traditional crumble topping, is it makes it moist and emulsify on the tongue so it swallows down. It's all yummy and ooey gooey. And the coconut oil combined with the almond flour will do the exact same thing in this recipe.
And just with a healthier list of ingredients. So I'm just lightly whisking the vanilla and the agave and the almond together. It won't combine completely for me, but it will enough that I can then put it in with this crumble and
then she's going
to
mix it up
with my fingers. It's like cooking for kids. It's fun. So while I'm doing that, Dr. Purcell is going to put together the base, and we've used green apples, and I just wanted to note that it calls for 4 cups of thinly sliced green apples, and I used a couple of fairly large green apples. They were a little bit bigger than my fist, and I actually sent them through the food processor to slice them quickly, and I used about 2.5 large green apples, and we did peel those. Jason actually peeled them for us. So okay, it looks like that's going to combine up just fine. I'll get my fingers in there.
So here we go with the Granny Smith apples, 4 cups of them that Alicia put through the food processor, and you can see they're very thinly sliced. The thinner slice the apples, the more quickly this dish is going to cook. If you don't have a food processor and you chop the apples by hand, they certainly don't have to be this thin. I've made it myself just chopping the apples, but do know that if you chop them thickly, that it's going to take much longer for the dish to cook, and then what's going to happen is the crumble topping is going to burn and the apples won't be cooked.
Ah, and that's actually a good point, because if I had done that by hand, they probably would have been fairly roughly chopped, just as a, you know, I would have been thinking, oh, rough chopped is great, they'll cook just fine, and, you know, time restrictions and whatever. So good to know. More finely sliced is going to be better, yeah.
The other thing is here, I'm adding a little bit of cornstarch. So this takes the place of flour in a traditional apple crisp type recipe. I've got some additional cinnamon in here, and if Alicia, you'll just pass, oh, there it is, the agave, lovely, and there's going to be 1 tablespoon of agave in this.
So it's 3 tablespoons total of agave for the entire recipe.
Looks like we're both going to get our hands dirty in this recipe.
You can't believe how good this smells. This smells like cookies. It's just killing me.
And you know, if you'll just show the viewers, Alicia, this really looks like a typical crumble.
Mm-hmm. It really does. I really like the consistency of the almond flour. It's,
yeah, you won't be disappointed
that little
if you
bit
haven't.
Grainy, and yeah, I'm really, really pleased with how
very,
this feels.
very good. The one thing that might shock you, listeners, if you've never played with it before, is the price of the almond flour. It is a pricier flour, but believe me, a lot lower in carbs, a lot higher in protein, and the taste is delicious.
Yeah, I think I paid about $4.50 for. There would have been about 3 cups worth, maybe 4 in the package. So not inexpensive, but when I look at the overall number of dollars that it will cost to produce this amazing dessert, it's not that expensive. You know, if I was to compare it to, you know, if you went and got a cup of coffee to go or something, you know, it's a reasonable number of dollars, even though it might be more expensive than what you would normally buy. Now you get to also grease the baking dish with a little coconut oil there.
That's true, with a little bit of coconut oil. So now what we have are apples that are tossed lightly in the cornstarch, the cinnamon, and a slight amount of agave.
I think I just found a little piece of apple seed. If you saw me throwing something away, I wasn't sure if it was a dark chunk of walnut or a bit of apple seed, but I thought I'd just put that to the side. This is really fun to play with. It's fully combined. I really could leave it alone now, but it just feels good.
That's part, you know, it's having fun in the kitchen. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
It's about making delicious, healthy food and having fun doing it, which is why I always encourage my patients to get their children involved with chopping vegetables and being present in what food is being served, because kids get really excited about it, and then it's not so hard to get them to eat their vegetables.
Yeah. And you know, that's an important part of food too. You know, millions and millions of dollars are spent on packaged foods looking and smelling good, because that's what attracts us to them, and that's how they sell us processed food. But that's a really important concept to remember in your own kitchen, because I hear, you know, so many people when they're talking to me about maybe they want to get healthy, and they always end up saying something like, oh, but health food is so boring. Well, yes, it can be, or it can be delicious and fun, and it can look beautiful and it can smell great. It's all about the herbs, the spices, the time and love you put into it. You know, you can make healthy, really healthy food look and smell and apparently feel amazing. So our apples are just kind of loosely arranged in the dish there, and we're going to add our crumble topping.
And there's really plenty of crumble. I've made this dish in more of a square pan. This one's more rectangular and lengthwise, but there should be enough crumble whichever pan you choose.
Good, so that's a nice covering there. Lovely.
And we'll just show you what it looks like before we put it in the oven. When it comes out, as you'll see, it'll be nice and toasty on top, and then you'll know your dish is done.
And we have our healthy apple crisp fresh out of the oven. Took about 20 minutes on convection bake at 350, and it is absolutely perfectly browned and done. Now, Dr. Purcell, you wanted to tell us just a little bit about apples, because we are coming into fall. It is apple season.
And apples are so nutritious, Alicia. They're high in vitamin C, they're high in fiber, they contain malic acid, which helps our gallbladder to detoxify. Just a word of caution though, apples are on the top 12 highly sprayed fruits and vegetables list. It's called the Dirty Dozen. And so it's very important to buy your apples organic. And if they're not organic, the skins have to be scrubbed either with a lemon juice or a vegetable wash with the sink brush to make sure that the pesticides get off the apples, because the skin is very nutritious. In this crisp, we took the skins off, we peeled the apples, but eating the apples with the skin provides a lot of flavonoids and fiber, and apples are a super healthy food.
And apples are one of my favorite foods. I call them portable fast food. And it would be a very rare day that you looked in my purse that you didn't see an apple rolling around in there, because when I'm out and I'm busy and I'm hungry, an apple is just the quickest, easiest thing to grab and eat. And I just take them with me everywhere, and I really recommend that. So thank you so much for such a wonderful dessert recipe. And you know, if you're having people for holiday dinners this coming season, try this out ahead of time. I think you'll be very, very happy with it.
And so will your guests.
Yes.